Okay, we're live on YouTube. All right, it's currently the morning here where I'm at here in Australia, and I thought I'd just do a live stream. Not sure how long this one will go for, but we'll just go off the riff here and discuss what's happened over the last few days or week. So yeah, in regards to the fight over the weekend with Wilder and Chisora, I think the last time I spoke about this was like beforehand. It was probably about the whole Simon Jordan saga. But I think we can all say that after the events, there's probably a lot more to unpack than just an interview that's, gone sort of semi-viral. But I actually thought the performance was good from Deontay. I thought that Chisora really didn't have an answer for any of it. We knew he would go hard early and be relentless, but a lot of the time that's not enough. And that goes for probably, most fights. It's all well and good when you got people standing right there and, you got people who are, what's up, TS Boxing? Salute. I haven't said that in a while. But it's all good when you got guys who are available or sort of, withering in the corner and just wilting away. But it's another thing when someone's actually doing things in a, or in a method. Mutual says hi. I don't know what you mean by that, but I'll probably figure it out in a few seconds. But yeah, I mean, I think I know what you mean now. Okay, thanks. As I said, I'm going off the riff here, so yeah, and I knew who you were talking about. Yep. I got a really croaky voice this morning. I don't know why, but anyway, so I'm gonna do a bit of looking up and just maybe react to some stuff on the live stream as well, briefly. But I do think if we're talking about a scorecard as well, I mean, split decision, absolutely not. I think 3 rounds max, to Chisora. Even if you give him 4, you got the 10-8. I think there were 2. See, I haven't even looked it up much, but there were 2 knockdowns, so that's 4 points. So there's no split decision. There's no split decision there at all. At the end of the day, yes, Deontay got hit, but he didn't get hit consistently. There are a lot of times in that fight where, Chisora was throwing, and a lot of the shots were getting blocked. A lot of them were hitting the arm. He was getting pushed away. He was missing. There were times where he'd throw an overhand, fall over the ropes or into the ropes, and Deontay was sort of almost turned him, pivoted almost, and then he'd maybe try the right hand and he'd like barely miss. And I do think that element of it is just age. I do think that element of it is probably just him not having the same speed. But I feel like that doesn't matter as much because, again, when someone is ducking continuously, it's going to be very difficult to hit them. And when they're always planning to come up with shots from over the top, you can't just try use uppercuts all the time. And that's where I feel like he used the uppercuts in a really good way. Hey, Mo. Good to see you. Hope all's well with you. But that's why with the uppercuts, I felt like he did it. The frequency of when he did it was good because he didn't throw it when an overhand was coming at the same time. There were technical things there that I think need to be fixed. one of them is he needs to jab more. And I'm not saying he needs to throw 1,000 jabs. I'm just saying he needs to throw jabs. Don't even have to land, to the face, but they should be to the point where you're at least making contact with some part of the body. Because again, you're sort of gauging distance anyway by doing that to then let your other shot go. I feel like the footwork is something that if he continues to not cross feet or like bring them together and sort of look uncoordinated at times, if he just irons that out, that will be a good thing. Because then he'll always be in a good position. He'll always be in a good position with that. Because then he won't get caught with silly stuff. And again, a lot of the stuff he got caught with was, there were times where, a couple jabs would get through. And then, he'd throw the overhand in between an exchange. So, yeah, that was one of the elements of it. The knockdowns weren't clean. I agree they weren't clean, but I don't think we can blame the ropes because at the end of the day, this was Chisora's, whole idea, right? This was on his terms. And usually when you're the fighter who's on the home turf, you are responsible for that sort of element of the event, right? Like you get in the ring, you feel how the canvas is, you go on the ropes. So if there was a problem with the ropes, he probably would have known the night before because usually after the weigh-ins, they'll go to the ring and they'll test it out. So, or maybe he didn't. But there was a shot where Chisora was falling through already and got hit by a shot. That's a knockdown. That's legal. It was in one of the later rounds, but that's legal, And again, he was putting himself in that situation because how come Wilder didn't fall through the ropes? He was on the ropes a fair bit, not as much as he has been in the past. And he's taller and he's got more vertical mass that's falling backwards because he's taller. And there's a lot of people saying that it was sloppy, this and that. Again, I've seen way, 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 way worse fights. I mean, my goodness, there were a lot of clean shots in this fight. And because they didn't show it on the highlights, because DAZN had like 3.5 minutes worth of highlights, barely. I mean, half of those highlights were clinching. I feel like if they had actually gone through the fight properly and made the proper edits, they would have showed, the right hands landing. Like there were times where he had Chisora up the ropes and he was just jabbing him into the ropes. So it wasn't this close fight, in my opinion. It wasn't this close fight. But even if you disagree that the fight wasn't close, the judges certainly made it appear so that it was. So really, no one can really complain about the scorecard I'm talking about Chisora, if you want Chisora to win, because I mean one judge had him winning anyway, so there's that. There's other elements of the fight that people probably won't talk about, and I thought the crowd was pretty unsavory. Look, I know the UK is passionate. I know in England they got passionate fans, but it was a bit ridiculous at times. I mean, these guys were literally celebrating over punches that were that were missed. I mean, there was a bit where Deontay was in the corner and then he walked forward and he does that thing with his gloves where he puts one on top of the other. It's some little trick he does with his jab, but and Chisora threw an overhand and it sort of glanced. It looked like it landed clean, but it didn't. And then all the fans were just going off their head. They were going crazy. The round 11, the knockdown, well, round 11 was not scored a knockdown, I don't think, because one the punch missed. It like just went over the top of his arm. But also he stepped on him. He stepped on his foot. So, and then the fans went crazy. And I found it very interesting that, like, is it Kale or Kale Soland, whatever? Eddie Hearn, like, all these promoters were there celebrating this fight. Like, for Chisora, obviously, because that's who they wanted to win. I thought it was a bit over the top, to be honest. The reactions from the crowd. I understand it, but at some point, it's like, even in round 12, Chisora got hurt again. Got hurt badly again in the 12th round. And he, the crowd was too busy focusing on the fight in the crowd. And that's sort of how the crowd thought Chisora lost anyway, because look how many people exited the arena when they were done. That's not even a joke. Like, people just went out of that arena straight away once that fight was announced. So, yeah. Something clever he was doing was grabbing when punched. Yeah. I don't think it was excessive holding, to be honest. A lot of people say he was holding a lot. I disagree. I think that there were one or two times where he should have maybe just turned himself out of a corner or something. But again, we can split hairs all we want, but even with those changes, it's just more in support of the other side. God, I'm so tired this morning. I don't know why, but yeah, I'll just I know you guys are putting comments down. I'm gonna look up some videos, see if any of the media is covering it, any interviews, just to sort of see the fallout. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Chisora's punches really did anything to the guy, which is amazing because I thought his chin was gone, but it's clearly not. I guess when you take a good enough break and your body is rejuvenated and all of that, I mean, we've got people out here lying already. I'm not going to name the channel, but saying Anthony Joshua will fight Wilder for a tune-up before Tyson Fury by a certain channel. It's like, that's just not true. Like, that's not true at all. People talking about Malik Scott. For a lot of people that dislike Deontay, there's sure as hell a lot of people talking about him to this day. I mean, there's a channel that's a very anti-Wilder channel. He's uploaded 3 videos so far today. There's actually not many videos today about the whole thing. Maybe TalkSport are talking crap today. Sorry, guys, I'm not looking at the chat because I'm on another tab. Dylan White doesn't fight Joshua any day of the week. Okay, well, you had your chance and you popped dirty again. So there's that. Obviously, people want Chisora to win because it was his last fight. Yeah, that was one reason. But the other reason was they wanted to see the American get knocked out and make memes afterwards. And how that has now backfired is because everyone's now changing their tune. But to be fair, people are even saying that they thought the ref was bad. But a lot of them aren't saying the ref was bad, but Wilder almost won. Oh, sorry, also won. So like they find it, they still find it very difficult to admit who won. But then there's a small subsection of fans that are acknowledging he clearly won. So I guess all hope is not lost. Do you think people? I know you're addressing Mo. Do you think people were over exaggerating how sloppy the fight was? What about Wilder's power? We've seen Derek get knocked out several times. Several. I don't think he's been knocked out many times. He's been knocked out twice. David Hay knocked him out, Silly and Dillian White. What was the other two? Tyson Fury stopped him twice. Yeah, and then he's been dropped by Parker. Who else is he being dropped by? He's actually, I think he's been knocked out more than actually. Sorry, he's been dropped more. No, he's been knocked out more than dropped. I'm trying to think who's dropped him in recent times. I know Klitschko didn't. Dillian didn't. He only knocked him out. Parker knocked him down. I don't think anyone else has knocked Chisora down. I don't think anyone has knocked him down. In terms of the power's still there. Look, the guy can take a punch, you know. This isn't the first time someone's gone the distance with Deontay. This, I think people forget this. Like, Fury, went the distance somehow. Bermain Stavern went the distance. And Bermain Stavern got hit a lot cleaner, a lot more often. So I don't think it's a power thing. I think just the other guy, one, knew how to survive, two, had a shit ton of help from the ref. I mean, if that fight was 10 years ago and we had that same ref, that fight would still probably go to points. But I think it would. Because you can't stop someone who's just getting assistance all the time. It just can't happen. If that was Joshua in there, the same thing probably would have happened. But I think the power is still there. The power more so now, I would say, is going to be a lot more bludgeoning. It actually might hurt more because when you get older and that man strength sets in even more, sometimes you can become more dense. And that means the heaviness of those punches, that real like thump. I mean, it might be more hurtful. Who knows? I thought Wilder was holding a bit too much. I think you can say he was holding for sure, but I think Chisora was holding more. If you look at Chisora, he'd throw an overhand, a body shot, and then he'd grab. You see him putting his hand under his arm. He was initiating most of the clinches. I agree there was a little bit of holding, but not nearly as much as other fights we've seen. What about all the Klitschko fights, right? Especially Vladimir. He held every single time. Oh, man, I got some pain in my hip. And speaking of hips, Chisora was hitting, a lot of those body shots weren't even clean. They were hitting the hips or below the belt. To be fair, I think Wilder was wearing his shorts just a little bit high. But then again, maybe he wasn't because the actual groin guard, the way it fits, sometimes it arches around the back. So it looks like a tie-up. So maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe his right hand isn't how it used to be. Yeah, I think you're right there. But it's still it's not a huge difference. It's just the speed, really. But even with that, right, I still think he's quick. I still think he's fast. Because he got hit by that overhand, smiled, and boom, straight away hit him. I think if you can do that, the physicality is still there, Like the zip on the punches is still there, in my opinion, I'd say what was a nightmare getting a thumbnail for this video. I couldn't find a good picture. Like that StreamYard would accept. But yeah, I mean, it was still entertainment. I wonder how much they were charging for a ticket there that night. That would have been interesting to see, I think. But yeah, I mean, look, I was happy with what I saw. I'm not going to explain everything that I was happy with because we'll be here all night. But I think his punch resistance is good. If we actually look at the Zhang fight, again, he got hit by a very powerful puncher in a very quick exchange. And he actually still got up. He beat the count. The ref just didn't continue because obviously he didn't show that he was in great shape to continue because he was wobbly and everything. And even if we want to talk about the Zhang fight, I mean, he won the first round, and many people had him winning the first round. He didn't even look great. Like, I believe he could beat Zhang in a rematch, if I'm honest. It's just the way he went about it last time wasn't great. But even then, he had Zhang a bit buzzed and hurt. Not hurt badly. But yeah, like, the guy's always had a good chin. It's really, if you hit him at the back of the head, that's how you put him down. Or if he's really tired. There's no real other way to go about that, Chisora isn't really a puncher like that. I can understand where you're coming from on that, but I disagree. I think if you said that 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. I think now it's clear that the guy has power. From the top of my head, obviously he had some early knockouts in his career, which are whatever. In the 2010s and all that. When he fought Dillian White, he had Dillian White hurt. I mean, he had him out on his feet at one point in their first fight. I think he hits harder than Dillian. Maybe not as hard in the left hook, but overall, I think he hits harder. He's more heavy-handed. He knocked out Carlos Takam with 1 or 2 punches. Takam is a very, very hard man to knock out, at least back then. But Anthony Joshua couldn't do it. Who else we got? Knocked out David Price. I mean, again, David Price has no chin, so that's fair enough. Spilka, that was a good knockout. He dropped Parker. How many people beforehand were able to drop Parker? He put Parker on his ass very quickly. He put him down very quickly in that first fight. He chucked that big overhand. He dropped Otto Wallen, Joe Joyce. Off of the ropes. So I think he can punch. Because there aren't many punches in the division anyway, in my opinion. So I think he can punch. I think at the very least, he's a decent puncher. I'm not saying he's the hardest hitter, but he hit him very, very hard on very precise spots, and he still couldn't do anything to him. So that leads me to believe that, his ability to get through that damage, it's still there, But yeah, not many people are talking about it today in regards to sorry, I'm just looking through something. This is interesting. Not many people are talking about the whole events. More so now, it's about the Joshua matchup and all of that, which I don't think will happen. To be honest, I don't think that will happen. I don't think Joshua will fight Wilder next. I don't think that fight will ever happen. But it might, given the fact that they did say years ago that they would do it when they're in a position to win. But we all know the whole spill on that. In terms of who I want to see, I would actually have no problem not seeing him fight again. I would honestly have no problem with that. I think if he retired tomorrow, I'd actually be pretty happy with everything. I mean, rarely anything is ever perfect. So, you can always criticize things, but if you retired tomorrow, I'd be actually pretty happy. I think that's a good way to go out. You win your last fight on enemy territory in that way. I think it's a good way to go out. But I do also think that he can contend for a world title. There's only two champions. There's Wardley, who in my opinion is rubbish, and then you got Usyk. And Wardley's fighting Dubois, Usyk's fighting the kickboxer. I think what if you want to go for one last fight, one last run, do it against Usyk because that's the guy. That's the guy. That's the one guy Usyk said he wants to fight. Well, the thing is that I don't really believe Usyk when he says that. And I'm not saying he's ducking or scared or whatever. I'm not saying any of that. But I think he knows that the risk is there. Maybe 2 fights ago it wasn't, but now it definitely is. So, and again, I'm not saying he gets beat, but, a lot of these other guys, they're just not very well accustomed to taking damage like some other fighters. And that's something they say, Can he be how do you pronounce that last name? It's Moses Ituma, Itama. I don't know how to pronounce that name. I've known of him for about, I don't know, I remember he had his debut or something. But anyway, can he beat him? Yes, I think he can. I saw Moses talking the other day saying that he got beat badly by Zhang and this and that and blah, blah, blah. I think realistically, and I'm not trying to sound disrespectful here, but Moses was being disrespectful in that interview. Like he was. Moses knows what he's doing. He comes across as well-spoken and well-mannered when he's really not. He's very arrogant, in my opinion. And it's all well and good fighting the Jermaine Franklins of the world and, whoever else. When you step up to that level and you get hit, that's going to be a problem. Because unlike Wardley and Dubois and those guys have at least somewhat proven themselves on some scale. Moses is not. He hasn't. So I disagree that, he's this next up-and-coming superstar. Because isn't Wardley still considered an up-and-comer? Even though he's got a world title, he's a champion. You've hit the pinnacle of what you can do, right? So what left is there to do for someone like Wardley, technically? But these same young guys will then say that the Joshuas of the world and the Wilders of the world and Usyk, still need to do more. What more do those guys need to do? Those guys can retire now. And I'm pretty sure they'll all be pleased with what they've done in their career overall. So for me, there's no real, I don't know. I feel like these up and coming prospects or whatever, I don't know. When they say these things, I find it very weird because then I look at them and say, well, what have you done? And this business of who have you beat, this and that, isn't it funny how when Deontay before Deontay fought Derek, Wilder had beat no one, he had fought no one. And now that he's beat the number 2 contender in the IBF, now people want to say, oh, well, he's beat no one. Or, he's only beat one contender. So these fans and these outlets and media, they're not very consistent on their viewpoint. They don't understand that when their argument is debunked, when a result happens that, straight up debunks what they're claiming, they can't now backtrack on that. They can't backtrack on that. And if you actually notice, not many people are calling for a fight. Most fans are not calling for a fight saying we should see this next. They're talking about Joshua a bit, but that won't happen. And they're not even really saying, they'll say, Joshua will beat him anyway, which is, there's a likelihood of that happening. But as you saw from the weekend, nothing is guaranteed. Because I picked this is something a lot of people don't know. I picked Chisora to win. So I know what that is to sort of be like, oh, well, I was wrong, you know? But if you look at the time since last year, because Wilder had the fight against Herndon, which was a warm-up of some sort, to just sort of see if he wants to continue doing this, and physically be there. And then you've got this fight in Chisora, which he had more improvements upon, visually seeing the fight than I've seen in some other guys. Because guys like Usyk can't improve. They are what they are. So guys like Fury, and I was actually watching a bit of the Fury clips with Usyk yesterday with the build up to those two fights. And I got to say, man, like, Fury, he is relentless with the shit talk. He just will not let it go at all. But, he didn't handle the loss as well. He claims he does. He doesn't handle it that well, I don't think. And again, guys hit a ceiling. Guys hit a ceiling. So yeah. But that's just, that's just the way it is. I really want to see Usyk versus KBL. It's funny because that would actually be a good fight for Wilder. Because KBL just comes forward. He's got barely any defense. And, he just eats shots. He's got a good engine, sort of. But a lot of his wins come off the fact that his opponents just don't quite know how to, put the foot on the acceleration pedal. So, I think him against Usyk, he's too slow for Usyk, in my opinion. He's not skilled enough. KBL fought Chisora back almost 10 years ago. Fought him 9 years ago. So, yeah. I mean, I agree they're relentless, but, when you're throwing that against a Zhang doesn't know how to fight on the inside. Zhang just stood there and took it and he gassed. If you got someone in there that's moving, that's going to throw back, who's very precise as well, or, who's boxing around you, it's not going to work. Not in my opinion. But again, the reality with that standpoint as well is, like, just say KBL fought Usyk and then won. Well, what would they say about Usyk? That Usyk is rubbish all of a sudden? So again, people should be careful what they wish for, because if Usyk loses to KBL, people can't claim that Usyk is this all-time great, can they? That they so much claim that he is. Because you got to understand, all it takes is you got to lose one fight and then the fans will turn on you. Because look at Fury now. Fury's rubbish according to everyone because he lost to Usyk twice. Joshua's not that good according to people now. So what if Usyk lost? Is he rubbish all of a sudden? So you got to really question people with what they say. And that's why you won't really hear me saying, oh, I want to see this and that. I'm not really asking for anything, I'm not really asking for anything at all in regards to matchups. I don't really care, I'm sort of indifferent to it. I don't really have much enthusiasm towards it. But I like the fight on the weekend. And I think yeah. It was I know they had an undercard. I didn't watch that. I'm not interested. But I'm pretty It is an interesting time, that's for sure. It's an interesting set of circumstances in which we've got people who are, in that mix. But the only fight that makes sense for me going forward is that Usyk one. Like, I'm talking about sort of from a style matchup standpoint. I think that would be interesting at this current time. That's just the way I see it. So, yeah, I'm happy with what I saw. I'm not really sure what else I can add to that, to be honest. I know Tyrone was happy with what he saw as well. I know, but that's the thing, isn't it? Just the way it's happened so late in his career, and yet we see improvements. It's very interesting, I find. It's quite fascinating, if you ask me. I did not expect that. In all honesty, I really didn't. You know? I really didn't expect that whatsoever. Interesting. But, I know TalkSport kind of got egg in their face because their idea was to sort of, decimate his character and, all that nonsense. Which I just find ridiculous, really. Simon Jordan just sounds like an idiot. He's one of these people who likes to say, "Oh, call it how it is, mate." You don't call anything. You just talk really quickly. You talk fast, and yeah. Like he's talking about, oh my goodness. Interesting. But look, again, yeah, he's a rage baiter and he knows what he's doing, but I don't think he does that. I think Simon Jordan, he's good at being unlikable. Because really no one likes that guy. I think we saw that with the Eddie Hearn debate as well. Like, people pointed this out online on Reddit. Simon's not really an intelligent person. I don't think he's very intelligent. But I heard someone say that Simon Jordan's like from a higher social class than Deontay. I'm thinking, well, yeah, he's from a different social class. I mean, he was a rich kid and he's a rich guy his whole life who's got millions and he's around other people who speak a very similar tongue to him. I mean, yeah, that's kind of like comparing someone who's, living in Mongolia to someone who's living in, Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. Obviously, the social class is different, but in terms of like formulating arguments and actually just speaking off of, or being transparent, I think Simon Jordan looks like an idiot because then one of the worst things I hate with these scenarios is when people go out of their way to antagonize someone and instigate an argument, and then they play victim. And people are like purposely ignoring the fight on the weekend and still talking about the racial comments. Like I saw this one video where this guy was saying white privilege claims another victim, and it had like a thumbnail of Deontay, and there was this like English guy. I think he was English. I think he was talking, and I could even watch like a minute of the video because one, I can't even understand a lot of these guys half the time when they talk. Not all of the people from the UK talk the same. There's different demographics and everything. I know that. I've been there, for God's sake. But a lot of people, they talk a lot, but they don't really make a good point. Similar to me. But anyway, yeah, what did he used to own? Crystal Palace, or was it another team? Queen's Park Rangers? One of them. I think I've been to Queen's Park's ground. He has a far right mentality. Does he, Mo? Does he support Nigel Farage and all that? Yeah. Nigel Farage must have been very unhappy with that result. But then again, I don't think he cares because he doesn't like black people. How can he like Chisora? Chisora's not even Chisora wasn't even born in the UK. He was born in Zimbabwe. He came to the UK when he was 16, to visit his mother. He's been saying this for years. I think it works out well for him. As an immigrant, it definitely worked out for him. He's a millionaire. And, people even talk him he is a reformer. What does that mean, Mo? Because in Australia, we don't really use that term all that much. Reformer is in bring it back to the old ways. Is that what that means? I'm not really up to scratch. I just know Nigel's a right-wing, far-right person. That's all I know. And I know it was about the Brexit stuff. I saw years ago Chisora was talking about Brexit and all that nonsense as well, about how they're not part of the European Union anymore, which in turn has been a terrible decision on their part, because now the UK does not have as much money as it once used to in terms of bringing, the economy up to speed a bit more, It's a new political party created by Nigel Farage. Yeah, it's a far right movement. We have one in this country that's sort of a little bit similar. Actually, that's coming up now. But to me, it doesn't really, I don't really care about the political. I've never really cared about the political viewpoints of athletes in general. Not really, because they don't have much of a platform to speak about it anyway. I don't think they have much of a platform. It's different for maybe singers or actors and that sort of thing. I think those are different sort of scenarios to do with that. That's what I think. Oh no, Chisora definitely supports reform. He's a very strong advocate of it. Actually, I remember when they did that TalkSport interview, Simon Jordan was like, I think it was one of the first things he asked Deontay. He said, you support right-wing movement over there in the US. Chisora here supports the reform. And Wilder's like, nah, I don't really follow politics. And then, Simon was really pushing it, saying, oh yeah, but Chisora, he's behind the reform. And Chisora just didn't say anything. He was kind of looking at him with that sort of weird, sort of dumb look, And I'm thinking, so you think because Deontay, who's from the South, in the southern states of the United States, because he's American, that he supports right-wing movements? And look, I don't know if Deontay has any political affiliation. I don't really care. But I would go as far to say he probably leans left. Because, he's all for social justice and, the rights of communities that aren't so well respected or well off and who face hardship, attending those sorts of protests. That's not someone that is a Republican, in my opinion. That's someone who supports that sort of social inclusion. That's probably to an extent where Deontay would land. I'm not saying he is that, but that's what he seems to be to me. So whoever's watching this, don't take my word for that. I'm just giving my opinion. I'm not saying it's a fact or whatever. I'm just saying that there's a pattern there that maybe supports it, you know? But I think, again, this is what I'm saying about Simon being a bit silly and a bit, he's not as smart as he thinks he is, because he thinks because the guy owns guns and is from Alabama that he's a right winger. That's not true at all. Not in my opinion. There's no proof at all to state that, you know? There's a lot of people who have those things who are in California. And California is, it's a left-leaning state. So I don't really know what people are talking about half the time. And again, Simon Jordan doesn't know a lot about. Look, if I were people, I wouldn't listen to Simon Jordan. This guy he just came out of nowhere. And now TalkSport have hired him because he talks shit. That's why. He talks shit and he knows how to move the needle. But the joke's on him, you know? Like, even if, like, we know Simon Jordan wants to see Deontay lose, right? But on Saturday, that was the only avenue. If Deontay loses to anyone else next, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because Deontay has nothing to lose at this point in his career. He has nothing to lose. He's got nothing to lose now. So it won't matter it doesn't matter who he loses to or how he loses, really. He's just going to, he's got nothing to prove. There's nothing out there to really prove to anyone. You know, it's done to death. All the arguments, he fought no one, this and that, all bums, no technique. It's all out the window now. It's sort of out the window. It's, it's sort of been, people have been saying this since 2008. I mean, since his debut, you know? So I'm just like, I don't know, I'm confused. They only hired him because he's good friends with Jim White. Yeah, Crystal Palace, there you go. Jim White doesn't seem to know a lot about boxing either. I don't expect these guys to be, to be overly, what do you call it? Knowledgeable about boxing. But if you're going to talk about it and get paid lots of money for it, you should at least not be up there lying. But then again, they don't care. And I don't really care all that much either. I don't see it as some big deal, in my opinion. It's not something that I they can say whatever they want, as other people can also say what they want. There's no I don't know. There's no censorship for these guys anyway, so it doesn't really matter, does it? This is interesting. But yeah, again. But yeah, you're right, Mo. And that's not just what do you call it? That's not just TalkSport. That's all media. That's all the media. It's just to rage bait and demoralize. That's why talking on those platforms is not a good idea. You look at Simon Jordan every week. It seems to get arguing with every second day. He's arguing with everyone. He's always criticizing. He's got nothing good to say about anyone. It seems. That's why I would never trust him being nice around people. You can't ruffle feathers like that. Similar to what Piers Morgan does. Yeah, he tried to do that the other week with them, but it wasn't that effective, you know. Again, like, you know, look, again, when the money is there, these guys will they will grift, they will grift. But it's normal. None of it is surprising. So, I'm not really it's not a bad thing in the sense of getting paid, but it's the way you go about things, you know? You just can't be doing such a thing. But yeah, I think I'll wrap it up soon. Um, if you got any more questions, feel free to, put them below or whatever. Um, Again, I'm not going live consistently or anything. I'm not really paying much attention to, the sport and all. Things will come up here and there that will be of interest. And I'll call out things when I see them, but outside of that, it doesn't matter too much, So I guess it's good to have some positivity or positive result here and there because God knows sometimes people need it. So yeah. But no, I'm not watching other boxing events. I've been at the loop for a few years now. So yeah, it's I'm not interested really overall. I don't really care, It doesn't matter to me. So yeah. But that's just how it is, That's just and life happens as well. So there's a lot more important things that go on in the world, you know. Yeah, I mean, like I said, my boxing I don't think will last much longer the way it's going anyway. So from what I've been told and what I've heard here and there, the general public's just not very interested in it overall. And you say, oh well, people buy pay-per-views, this and that. You know, the '90s was probably the pinnacle. I mean, I think that would have been a great time to watch it. I reckon that would have been a really good time. But that's just things just happen, I guess. But I'm not interested in boxing really. I don't have an interest overall. The Deontay Wilder is a very interesting person, I find. Um, and even then, I don't really care all too much about what he says in interviews. I think it's commendable that he speaks up for people and the social justice lengths that he goes to. Um, but at the end of the day, it's also not my job to, prop someone up. And this can go for anyone that's earning millions of dollars a year, you know, for doing 36 minutes of work or less. And again, I want to make sure that doesn't come across as derogatory because it's not. I'm saying that there's a very big difference between someone working 40 hours a week and someone who gets paid after, training and all that, but, doing 36 minutes of work or less and earning a lot of money from it, like at a certain part of their career. I feel like there's not much for me to really contribute there. Me doing a stream like this is probably more than enough to just talk about it between people I know. That's about it. There's no real benefit outside of that. Which is why the things I say, they don't mean all that much anyway. They're just sort of my opinion, and that's that. A lot of the channels like the show business and all that, their job is to grift. Their job is to put down one side, prop up another. For them, it means something, and they're earning, they've got some arrangement going on with someone else to do that. So that's what it is, you know. Yeah, Mo, since what, 2022, 23, I've not really paid any attention to boxing all that much. Like I've not at all. Like I've been out the loop. So I'm not really I don't really care at all for it, you know. But yeah, I'm gonna finish up there. Thanks for those who joined by. Nice to see you again. And yeah, nothing else to really add to that. Good to be on for a little bit. And yeah, take care, guys. Be safe out there in the crazy world, and um, you know, try and enjoy the day as it goes. And yeah, take care.